Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, students across the US are protesting against racism and discrimination. One university president has already resigned, but how much more can this movement achieve?
It is our duty to fight for our freedom!
It is our duty to fight for our freedom!
It is our duty to win!
It is our duty to win!
We must love and support one another!
We must love and support one another!
We have nothing to lose but our change!
We have nothing to lose but our change!
Ashe!
Power!
Ashe!
Power!
Ashe!
Power!
You've just seen some of the hashtags associated with this story. Our digital producer Malika Bilal has been doing a little bit of hashtag analysis. Malika, what do you have?
Right, didn't have to dig very far. So as Femi mentioned, many different hashtags around this topic. You can see them behind me here, but one of the ones that ignited the most conversation was Black on Campus. It was started by a group behind protests at the University of Missouri, and it's had more than 140,000 mentions in the past week, as you see here, as it spread online to campuses across the nation and beyond. Now, students used it to share their experiences, and we want you to do the same. Tweet in with hashtag AJStream.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm a proud beneficiary of affirmative action, and I'm in the stream.
Students at the University of Missouri forced the school's president to resign last week after they protested his response to several incidents of racism on their campus. But the issue isn't limited to one university. Similar movements are growing at other schools, prompting a national conversation about race, discrimination, and institutes of higher learning and the role of administrators in responding. To help us talk about this, we're joined by Danielle Walker, a graduate student and protest leader at the University of Missouri, Mariam Foote and Lashanda Anakwa, protest organizers at Ithaca College in New York. They want their school president to resign. And Charlton McIlwain, who is the Associate Dean for Faculty Development and Diversity at New York University. We also invited administrators from several universities affected by protests to join in our show, but they turned us down. So, Mariam, Lashanda, what are you actually protesting about? Give us a little sense of what it is that has got you out as a body of students that makes you upset with your own university.
So there's been a lack of awareness of the racial issues on our campus.
Yeah.
This has been an ongoing problem, and there's been some recent events that have highlighted the issue and made it seem like it just started happening yesterday. But it's been a decade-long struggle, and we're finally standing up and fighting for what's right.
So
There's also been a lack of responsiveness from administration in addressing these issues, which is why we are specifically targeting administration and our president, Tom Rochon.
All right, so going on for a long time, but what's been going on for a long time? What are these racial issues you're talking about? Help us understand why you're so furious.
So the administration doesn't seem to understand how to make people of color on our campus feel comfortable. There are no safe spaces for people of color on Ithaca campus. There's just been a whole lot of racial insensitivity from faculty members, professors, and it's all been hidden under the rug. So all the people of color in Ithaca campus have experienced being the token Black person. We're in a classroom and the professor points to us and tells us to speak for our whole race. So the professors don't really have any diversity training or know how to connect with Black students or any other students of color.
Danielle, can you help us unpack this a little bit more? We're all actually, I have to say this, all various shades of brownness in this conversation and on this panel. Right. So we actually understand, but it's sometimes hard to unpack. Let's be very specific. If I ask you to be very specific, what story would you share with us?
I mean, going along with the hashtag of Black on campus, being Black on campus at the University of Missouri means that at any given time, when I am walking to class or walking to get something to eat or just hanging out with my friends, a group of white students can call me the N-word, a racial slur, and the university will do nothing about it. That's what it means to be Black on the campus of the University of Missouri.
Right.
As the other ladies had touched on, the lack of responsiveness and the concern of the well-being and safety of Black students is why I said I am fed up and led the move as I did earlier this semester.
Sure. You started a movement called Racism Lives Here, right? What's that
Yes.
about?
Racism Lives Here was in response to our student body president, undergrad, Peyton Head, who was one of the black students, which is a common occurrence to be called the N-word. And when this occurred to him or happened to him, I was expecting the administration to have a much more formal and appropriate response because it was our MSA president. And I was shocked and flabbergasted to realize that it doesn't matter if you're MSA president, it doesn't matter what student titles that you hold, that our administration still has a terrible responsiveness to incidents of hate on our campus. And I just came to a point where I realized that something had to be done. We cannot continue to be silent about this. In the words of Andre Lorde, your silence will not protect you.
You know, people online, as we mentioned at the top of the show, are also sharing their own experiences. And one of them is one that Miriam and LaShonda just shared. And so it's echoing that. This is Erica online. She says, being black on campus means being afraid to answer questions in class for fear of being wrong or seen as stupid in front of white peers. Another person alerted us to a hashtag at the University of Purdue in Indiana. This is Panther. When a TA or a teaching assistant your freshman year tells you you're bound to fail the class because most blacks do. That's what being black on campus is like there. But we also got this tweet from Collins, who serves as a little bit of pushback. He says students are overreacting. They want to be treated like eggs and they are adults, basically saying they're a little bit too fragile. So LaShonda, when you see that pushback, when you see people responding to other tweets like this, what do you think?
I feel like it's a matter of respect. It's not wanting to be coddled, but wanting to be treated with dignity. So when people have that response, I really don't understand where they're coming from, because all we're asking is to be treated with dignity.
See, Charlton, you can't be in every university campus, but can you help us understand as an international audience, what is going on in these instances where students of color are not feeling comfortable at the universities where they're studying?
Well, I think, Ms. Walker said it right when she said, I'm fed up. And I think one of the things that we mistake at college campuses across the country is that we believe that if there's no crisis, then nothing is going on. Mm-hmm. And so everyday sort of expressions that these students have mentioned, that the ones tweeting in have mentioned, that happen in the classroom, maybe a dorm room, elsewhere on campus, that's part of everyday life. So there's a sense in which, as a student, and it's been a long time since I've been a student, but I can recall just knowing you don't want to speak up every time, or speaking up has ramifications or consequences or implications. And so often you're silent until it gets to a moment like now where something just pushes us over the edge and pushes students over the edge. And now it's the time to speak out and say those things that have been on people's minds for quite some time.
Charlton, it's interesting. Go ahead.
I think that's a great point about remaining silent. When I embarked on the Racism Lives Here movement, I was told by many peers, faculty, and staff to be mindful of the university. And I was responding to them, why should I be afraid to talk about my experience as a black student on this campus? Why should I be afraid to hold my administration accountable for the atrocious acts that occur on our campus that are not being handled appropriately? And so I think understanding that students are fearful of speaking out speaks a lot to the climate of all these institutions, all these campuses, of why all these protests are beginning to erupt, and why I use the rhetoric of being fed up, and understanding that we've moved beyond fear, and that we are ready to finally take charge and hold our leadership accountable for what is going on in our campuses, and demand that all students are treated fairly and that we are able to feel safe.
So Miriam, I saw you nodding your head as Danielle was talking, and there's a question online that I want to address to you. This is Dandelion, who says, how is the reception for you on campus? Do you meet resistance? Do you get assistance from your officials? What kind of reception do you get? Do you feel that fear that Danielle talked about?
On campus right now, you have basically like two different student groups. You have students that are completely against this and students that are for it. And there's a lot of like pressure from administration and from other students to stop speaking about it because we're disrupting their education. And for us, it's been more like our education is disrupted every day we wake up. in this institution, and this is something that's extremely important to us. So I don't understand why that's the case. And there is a silencing of a lot of voices on campus by administration who literally ignore us and don't listen to what we have to say.
We do have faculty members who've been extremely supportive of our movement.
Tell us more.
We actually have faculty are holding a vote of no confidence soon because a lot of the faculty also feel that they have no confidence in our president, Tom Rochon, and they feel that he is unable to actually run this institution.
See, I think a lot of this problem is about the administration, the faculty's response to the issues that are happening, because they're not really responsible for what students are doing, but maybe they are responsible for how they deal with this. So for instance, Danielle, there's a story that I know that you can share with us about cotton balls on a lawn after a drunk party. Tell us the story and then tell us how that was dealt with, and then we can get a sense of why students are unhappy.
It actually occurred during my sophomore year back in 2010 during Black History Month. We have a Black Cultural Center, and a night, white students who were allegedly underneath the influence of alcohol had decided to put cotton balls all over the lawn in the front of the Black Cultural Center. And our administration, one, didn't respond immediately to what had happened on the campus because they cleaned it up quickly.
Yeah.
And then two, the charges that these individuals faced was littering. When you can't be any more overt in racism with connecting cotton balls to Blackness. And that response from the administration was a very solidified moment where I began to understand that that I stated before in other protests, that the University of Missouri does not care about Black students. You couldn't. To understand how one of the few safe spaces that we have on this campus was violated, vandalized, and you decided that the appropriate charges was littering, as if they just discarded a plastic bottle or a piece of paper. That was a very...
Do you think it's because they are not equipped to understand how to deal with racism? They don't know how to deal with it, rather than deliberately ignoring it. They have no tools.
I think to a certain extent it is intentional that they're always, they being the administration or the leadership or just the dominant group, is always very concerned about protecting the dominant group. And so these white students were given the benefit of the doubt versus how that's not a luxury or a privilege given to not only just Black students, but students of color, and how the charges would have been probably vastly different if this act was committed by students of color.
You know, picking up
Danielle,
on that,
it seems like it's
Charlton, picking up on that, we actually got a video comment that I want to direct to you because I want you to have a listen to what this person said. It's very similar to what Danielle was saying. This was Christian, who talked about reforming the system.
I just wanted to share my opinion on racism on college campuses, and I believe they continue because there are no consequences for something that's institutionalized. However, I do think there is an exorbitant amount of power in the unity and solidarity among college campuses around the nation, and our refusal to be silenced. When there are college students on their own campuses fearing for their lives and the teacher continues like nothing's wrong, that is racism. We cannot reform the system, we must eradicate it.
So strong words there, Charlton, but she says this is institutionalized. It's not something you can just do away with very quickly.
Well, I mean, I think it's a very good point. I think it's indicative of what Danielle was pointing out, which is you have these moments of very clear, explicit racism that goes on, and you have to either think one of two things are going on. Either people generally don't understand, and so they cite people for littering or something like that because they really don't get what's going on, or there's some sense in which they are trying to hide or they're trying to protect those who are in positions of power, whether they be students, administrators, or otherwise. And so I think it's right that what needs to be done is some change institutionally. That is, we can't send folks running around sort of one by one policing every student, but we can make it known on institutions that if you act in certain ways, there will be swift action, and that action will be against your particular interests. I was thinking back to, in contrast of what happened at the University of Missouri to what happened at my own alma mater, the University of Oklahoma, some months back. And you had a similar instance where very overt actions on the part of white fraternity students that was disgusting, that was outrageous, and it came to light. And the president's response was not, let's think about this. Let's think about who has the right to free speech. Let's really get into and understand what these students were trying to say. It was an immediate and swift reaction that said, this will not be tolerated here. And these students are gone. The fraternity is gone. And this is the message we want to send, that we are going to protect students of color on our campus who so often are not those that receive the benefit of the doubt.
I'm glad you actually brought that up. In my first rally that I led at Racism Lives Here, when I was critiquing our Chancellor Lofton, who's the head of our university's response to one of the recent racial incidents, I cited University of Oklahoma of how not to be afraid to use the words racist. That's what the president of University of Oklahoma said. He said racists are not welcomed here, and how powerful that is. How powerful to say that, and to say that they are leaving. This is not tolerated. The fraternity has to go. And that is one of the simplistic demands that students of color, Black students, are asking for. That when these incidents happen, that you respond promptly, not as you were mentioning, let's think about it, let's have a dialogue, let's explore freedom of speech. No.
Danielle,
and I think that's something
that's very interesting you said that, because here's Tim Wolfe before he resigned talking with a student. She says pretty much the same thing. Have a listen to what she said here in this video.
So I'm not here for a press conference. I don't want to talk to anybody. I want you resigned. I need for you to leave. That's not why we're here. We delivered the statement. I think that's all that we need to discuss. At this point, I don't care what you're doing, because you're not doing anything. You haven't made a statement about anything that happened with Concerned Student 1950 on 10/10/15. You have not made a statement about what happened just a couple days ago at Gateway Hall. So you don't care about racism. Racism doesn't matter to you. You don't understand systems of oppression. So we're not here to discuss anything. I think we've said what we need to say, so thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day. So, Mariam and Lashanda, you're asking for a resignation. Why? At Ithaca University. Go ahead. Tell us why.
At Ithaca College, our president basically has done absolutely nothing for students of color. We have specifically told him that these issues happen on campus, and he blames them on structural issues and refuses to address them himself. If you listen to his recent interview on the Ithacan, you'll hear that he basically just pushes the problem down the line. He creates committees and positions that mean absolutely nothing, just to give us a happy satisfaction and move along. And that's really what he's doing. He's just waiting us out. But we're not gonna just let him do that.
So
he creates committees of no substance just to try to appease us instead of actually trying to fix a larger issue.
So structural problems, does that mean he has to redesign, faculty? More faculty of color have to come in, more diversity? What kind of structural issues are there that need to be fixed?
We're really looking for just a transformative governance structure where students, faculty, and staff have more of a voice in the decisions that are made on campus. Right now, it's just the president and the board of trustees, and students have no say. We recently actually even had this thing called the Blue Skies events, and it was to reimagine how our campus would look like. And it was created basically by administration, and a lot of racial remarks were said during this, where one of actually our alumna, Tatiana Sai, was repeatedly referred to as a savage. And there was no condemning of this, or no response from administration about this.
So let me play a little bit of a clip, because I think it will help. So this idea was, it was a panel event that happened in early October. And the idea was, how do you reimagine a better education system for the university? Have I summarized that about right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And so Tatiana said that she had a savage hunger for, and then she was talking about achievement, education, and then that turned over into another way of using those two words, which was kind of unfortunate. Let me play a little clip here.
I had this savage hunger to make it happen, but it wasn't without learning the risky lesson of balance.
I love what the savage here said. You're driven, and have been driven since college, you're the savage, and you were driven.
What empathy means is actually caring deeply for other people's personal pain. And so as the savage sits here, it's a compliment. I'm really complimenting you because I think she's an amazing young woman.
All right, so yikes, all right. That was really unfortunate use of language and words, particularly in this current atmosphere. Let me just push on a little bit to see where our community is taking us to. Malika.
Well, they're actually picking up on something that Miriam and LaShonda talked about, wanting change structurally. So this is Samra on Twitter. She says, we need more representation in staff and administration. If there aren't minorities in leadership positions, what's the point? Another tweet here from Omar, who says, things like a diversity requirement could help. Things like ethnic studies courses definitely could help. So Charlton, these are some of the demands that we're seeing students make online. How realistic and feasible do you think it would be to implement them?
I think they're very realistic. I mean, I think what you've had in recent history are, close to these things. I mean, we all talk about our college campuses and how they could be more diverse, how our faculties could be more diverse, our student body, et cetera. So I think that, while these are challenges, there are things that can be done. And I think if we focus on them and we are realistic about the resources that are needed to devote to them to make things happen, I think they can happen. And, it's the structural nature of it means that diversity, inclusion, equity, all of these things are woven into the fabric of campus life in how we hire faculty, how we hire or admit students, the curriculum, how we respond, and the policies that we use to respond to incidents like these that have crept up on campuses.
Charlton, what would you advise the administrators at Ithaca University to do right now? If you could have a little word with them, what would you say?
The administration, I'd say, listen and listen well, and then be prepared to act, and be honest about the reaction. If it's, we can do some things, but we can't do everything, then say that. Don't promise the moon and then expect that students will go away tomorrow or a week from now or a month from now and simply forget about all these changes that we've or that they've asked for.
Yeah. Danielle, how powerful do you feel as a graduate student, as a student body, as a campaigner right now?
I still feel very empowered. I think what continues to draw power from the other students, all the great people that are working to make our campus more inclusive, even though the media has portrayed that we've obtained these victories last week, there is still much work to get done. And I think talking about as far as structural issues and things, opportunities, I get frustrated with how stagnant leadership can become. And I think another derailment in actually getting stuff done as far as diversity training or inclusion classes is the fact that when we construct race in the United States, is very much centered around a focal point in the civil rights movement in the 50s. And people just can't get past that, racism happened in the 50s, and now it's 2015. We have, President Barack Obama, who's our first African-American president, and everything's great. And all these movements and student protests are highlighting that, no, that is not the case. Unfortunately, yes, it is 2015, and we are still struggling. We are still suffering on these campuses. We are still facing injustices, and you can't continue to invalidate our experiences because it's not Jim Crow South or it's not the 1950s anymore. And so that's what continues to keep me empowered to continue to push my administration in order to cultivate real changes, such as hiring more administrators of color.
Danielle Walker, Miriam Foote, Lashanda Enakwa, and Charlton McIlwain. We're taking you online, stream.outerzero.com. Before we get there, Malika.
This last tweet from online, these actions that we're seeing will not end racism in society, but they will force administrators to deal with it or face being ousted.
If there's something that you want to add to our conversation, you can do that in our post show at stream.outerzero.com. Hope you can make it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hello, welcome back to the Streams Online Post Show. Let's get right back to that conversation. I want to show you something here. This is from Missouri University here. Students storming the stage. Have a look at this. Oh, sorry, this is from Ithaca University. I apologise. An effective takeover here. I'm really interested in tactics and strategy, and our online community were as well, Malika. So what do you have, just to bounce over this?
There were questions online about some of these tactics, some of these strategies. This is Nicholas, who wrote to us via Facebook, and this is a criticism, but in a nice way. They actually wrote to us, I am commenting out of curiosity, not just to make a statement. So this is Nicholas's concern. Is there a more civil way to protest without utilizing shock tactics, i.e. hunger strikes? These forms of protest don't always seem open to progressive discourse. Or is the system so corrupt that less dramatic forms of protests go ignored? So Danielle, I'll pose that to you. And of course, this community member is talking about the hunger strike that one graduate student at the University of Missouri went on to draw attention to this. So what do you make of the tactics in that criticism?
I would agree with the latter, that he's saying that the system became so corrupt. There are obviously different aspects of activism, of protesting to raise awareness and to cultivate positive change. But I agree with the latter of his statement of how the system has gotten to a point, it's became so egregious that a student was willing to give their life to show how difficult it is to be Black on campus.
Sure.
That to understand that, and once again to really blow through all these barriers, or this artificial lens of that, we're living in a post-racial society, and by having a hunger strike, by having these quote-unquote shock tactics are working. Because clearly, since students of color have been allowed admittance to these universities, we've always been fighting. Long before I even attended the University of Missouri, students of color, other Black students have been fighting. And so once again, to show that this is just a culmination of efforts that have been going on for decades, and I can only speak to that onto the University of Missouri, and how when you continue to use the respectable routes and you're trying to talk to administration, you're trying to become more involved on campus and try to engage and really take the burden onto yourself in order to make your campus more inclusive, but then you start to realize, it gets to a point that I don't get paid for this. I am a student. I am there to get my degree and to learn. I am not here to do the job of my administrators. And so calling attention to what they should be concerned about shouldn't be considered something that is considered radical. It should be something that would be deemed appropriate given the context of democracy in the United States, that students should be concerned as active stakeholders of what their leadership is doing to ensure that they are feeling safe and protected, and that their learning environment is not constantly disrupted by microaggressions and hate.
See, Danielle, go ahead, Chardon. You're my guest. Go ahead.
Sure. I was just going to say that I agree. I believe in civil discourse. I believe in the kind of politeness in civil society. But the fact is that all voices are not equal in this society, and so often people of color, their voices get drowned out. They're silenced, and then that requires that you do something drastic.
All right, so
you've got to be heard.
I want to hear about how far you've gone. Then, what's drastic? What are shock tactics? Danielle?
When I led movements and Racism Lives Here, I know that you all were showing clips of myself and another student leading a movement in our student center. That's never occurred before in the university.
Right.
No one has ever invaded these spaces, and we targeted these spaces because it's where white students feel comfortable. We strategically went to
that moment
places.
when you went into that space, what was your head telling you? What was that feeling like?
That not to be discouraged, that you have to keep pushing forward. The media coverage at the time didn't show the hateful things that white students were saying, but we kept pushing forward, and once again to demand that everyone that's a part of the University of Missouri committee take notice that we have a racial problem on our campus, and we will no longer be silent. We will continue to protest. We will disrupt any space. We will go to classes, we will be outside, we will be in the streets until everyone on our campus is focused on how to improve the racial climate here at the University of Missouri.
Danielle, let me just bring in Marianne. Marianne, you've been trying to jump in. Go ahead.
When we stormed the stage, actually, we had a lot of criticisms that we were preventing dialogue, but the problem was that, like a lot of the students of color, we've had meetings, a lot of meetings with administration. Many of us had like 5+ meetings talking about these issues, and nothing had happened. And so this was our kind of response in saying, like, we're tired of having empty dialogue, and this is what we're going to do until you give us something concrete, you know, something that we can look at.
Right. So
students of color at predominantly white institutions feel like they have to yell and scream to get their point across. And it's sad that we have to yell and scream for them to listen to us, but that's what we have to do. So I completely agree with everything Danielle just said.
Sure. May I Malika's going to just jump in a moment, but I have to show you something because this was bothering me until I heard you unpack it for me. So there was a Yale University student protest about a chain of email letters. So one email said, leading up to Halloween, be mindful of the costumes that you're going to wear. And then another email came back from, I believe, a member of the faculty saying, kids will be kids. We should be able to experiment, to offend. That's part of growing up. And then this university student did this to a member of the staff. Now, I was really shocked. I would never have spoken to my university professors like this.
Hired you!
I have a different
You
vision
should
than you.
step down! If that is what you think about being a semester, you should step down! It is not about creating an intellectual space! It is not! Do you understand that? It's about creating a home here! You are not doing that!
You're supposed to be our advocate!
You should be at the event last night when you hear a Franco say that she doesn't know how to create a safe space for her freshmen in Silliman! How do you explain that? These freshmen come here, they think this is what Yale is?
Okay, so I'm getting just upset just listening to this. This is really, I can hear the pain in her voice there, Charlton. But again, I couldn't imagine speaking to a professor like that when I was at university. I can't. Is this a different era of, I don't know, super student? Are they fearless? Or like, how can you curse at your professor? How?
Well, I think, you know, there's a level of anger that I think is very clearly evident that says probably in normal situations, this would not be the preferred way of acting. But what you see is that act of desperation. And I think that what you see or hear most of all is her words that says this is not just an intellectual community, which is what we think of about the university. This is where people go to discuss ideas and we have free conversation. But she says this is also a home. And I think many of us lose sight of that these are places where 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds come, and this is home. And if they cannot feel safe, if they cannot feel protected by an administration, then that administration has failed them. And that leads to that kind of anger and probably leads to a sense in which that reaction is right in this instance.
Malika.
So there is a question, picking up on what you said, Charlton, there is a question here from a student in Canada who sent us a video comment. Her name is Sarah, and she talks about how to make sure that that idea of home is something that everyone on campus can relate to. So she had a question that I'm going to pose to you, Danielle. I want you to have a listen to what she told us.
So throughout my activism, I've been told that discussing white privilege is actually racist. So I was just wondering, what do you tell people when they say these kinds of comments? And how do you confront these people and talk to them about what privilege is without sounding hateful or without making it seem like you're dividing the races? So I was wondering if you could expand on that. Thank you.
So Danielle, your response, your advice to other college students from around the world who might be watching this and wanting to make that first step and opening that conversation.
I think it's important for people who are interested in, you know, promoting social justice and activism to know that this isn't rainbows and sunshines. In order for people to truly understand the systematic oppressions that are occurring in our society, some people have to come to truth with some very, you know, hard concepts such as white privilege. And so for those who think that it's rhetoric that's being used to continue to divide the races, the fact that we have race, which is a social construct, has already divided us. Discussing white privilege begins to unpack and begin people to understand the different lenses that people see society and how society interacts with different people, especially of different races. And so white privilege is a fantastic term to really actually get to a root of a lot of different problems at these institutions, because a lot of people, especially within the United States context, we have that, that motto that, we work hard for what we want. We everything we got, we earned it, and we worked the hard way for it. And no one wants to think that, they were given a cheap pass through life, and that's how they got everything they got. So no one wants to feel like their hard work was invalidated. But that's not actually the point of white privilege. White privilege is understanding that, once again, going back to the University of Missouri, that when you walk anytime on the campus, and just keeping this for maybe like just white men, you don't have to be fearful that someone is going to yell something hateful at you. That's just white privilege. Or understanding that your history is a core requirement, whereas my history is an elective.
Sure.
That's white privilege.
Daniel, what are you studying right now? You're a graduate student. What's your studies right now focused on?
I am a current master's student at the Truman School of Public Affairs and Educational Policy.
Good luck. All right. Mariam, what are you studying right now?
Environmental studies and politics, double major.
Okay, Lashanda, what are you studying?
Writing and politics.
All right, good luck with your studies. I sound like your auntie now.
Me too.
When I was at university, we didn't curse at the professors. Charlton, what are you working on? What's your next project, Charlton? I know you do a lot of different things. What are you currently working on?
I'm working on this. I'm working on race and digital media activism, and so ways that people use digital media and the internet to push for racial justice.
All right. Well, thank you, Charlton and Mariam and Lashanda, Danielle, for being part of this conversation. You really helped us unpack it and understand it a whole lot more than we did 45 minutes ago. Malika.
And thank you for sharing your stories. People online are saying the same thing. This is Jason, who tweets in, how powerful to see shared stories of pain and resistance. Again, people are not making this stuff up.
Thank you very much, guests. Take care, everybody.